good for you. Come on. We'll think of another place. Come with me. Let's have a smoke break. Nah, not just a normal break. Let's smoke break. Smoke break. Smoke break.
30 seconds and counting.
There were plenty of years where there were guys who would dread being drafted by the Buffalo Bills. Not anymore.
Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
Brandon Beane realizes they're in a window of 2 to 3 years max to get this done while the iron's still hot. And getting Von Miller into that situation was big for the Bills.
10, 9.
Oh, baby.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Great interview, guys.
Yo! What up, Buffalo Fanatics? Z-Bot here with you, live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Tuesday afternoon. And it can only mean one thing. It is the Smoke Break, powered by BetUS, where the game begins. Receive a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500 via the link in the description below using the promo code JOIN125. Folks, the NFL as of today has officially changed as we know it. The landscape of the NFL from the beginning of the game to every score in between will no longer look like what it looked like in the past. Major changes coming out of the 2024 NFL owners and coaches meeting. We have a new kickoff. We have a banned tackle. We have a new Hard Knocks to look forward to. Some more ability to look under the hood for the referees and adjust calls. So much coming out of Orlando, Florida that we have to look into. I'm telling you, it's going to take some getting used to because the NFL as we know it has dramatically changed today. Thanks so much for joining in here on the Smoke Break on a Tuesday afternoon. Sorry I missed you last night. It was my 27th birthday and my fiance had a dinner planned for me. And I had to push the smoke break to today, and I'm glad that I did because we get to talk about everything that we found out from the coaches meeting that unfolded over the last couple of days here in Orlando, Florida, including the banned hip drop tackle and, of course, as I noted right off the bat, the brand new kickoff rule. The NFL has been trying to find a way to get kickoffs relevant again. There was a time where the kickoff was what it was. It was the kickoff. It was what we had known forever. And once injuries and head injuries in particular started piling up, it was noticed that the kickoff was the most dangerous play in the sport. You got half the team, one team on this side and the other team on the other side running full force at each other all the way down the length of the field, barreling into one another. The NFL realized this is not a good way to prevent injury. We got to find ways to make this play safer. And when they started going down that avenue, they started eradicating the kickoff itself. Only 22% of kickoffs in the 2023 season were returned. And if you remember, just recently here in the Super Bowl, not a single kickoff was returned at all. Every single kick was a touchback. So what the kickoff itself had become, it had become a ceremonial type play. It had just become a play that you're accustomed to seeing. And over time, you had grown accustomed to just watching the ball sail out of the end zone. When the kickoff occurs now, you almost, if you're getting ready for the game Sunday, 1 o'clock, you got to run to the bathroom real quick. If the kickoff's about to occur, you still got about a minute or two before actual football takes place, because it is, according to last year, about an 80% chance that opening kickoff's going out of the back of the end zone. Nothing's going to occur. So the NFL is faced with a bit of a predicament here. What are we going to do? Because we've already tried our best to make this play safer. We've come a long way in doing that. But what has come with that is essentially the elimination of the kickoff itself. How do we keep the kickoff part of the game while still keeping it safer? Ironically enough, a different type of football league came in and implemented a certain type of kickoff that the NFL itself has just adopted. The NFL has adopted the XFL style kickoff, and this is going to be implemented starting this upcoming year. No time to waste, no adjustment period. This is starting week 1 of the NFL season in just a couple of months from now. So we're going to dive into this deep right off the bat. We'll also talk throughout the show here about all of the other changes that came out of the owners' meeting as well. And I saw in a comment earlier that I definitely want to address the PSLs and the money that is going to be spent to see the Buffalo Bills in their new stadium. We'll touch on that. But we're going to start on the biggest change that came out of these owners' meetings, and that is the NFL kickoff. Now, my friends over at Part of My Take put together this awesome graphic that I have found, based on everything I've seen, breaks it down the best. So here is this graphic posted by the Part of My Take Twitter account. If you'd like, you can go over to their Twitter right now and save this in your phone so that anytime you get confused, you can go back and look at it, because it's not just a singular change. There are multiple changes involved within the kickoff. Now, it's not like just one thing was implemented where they had done like they had done in the past, where, we'll move the kicker up more, or the touchback is now worth the 25-yard line as opposed to the 20. There are multiple changes involved here. It's certainly going to take some time to get used to. The only way you're going to get used to it is just getting thrusted into the league this year, watching the games. And I'm sure, like all these other changes we've seen in the past year, you will eventually become accustomed to it, but it's going to take some time. When we've seen changes in the past, they've definitely altered the game, but this is probably one of the biggest changes to the overall sport in my lifetime. Not all that long ago, of course, they moved back the extra point. They had felt that the extra point was just way too easy. Let's make it a bit more difficult. Let's add a bit more drama to the game. We've noticed that certainly has worked. Kickoff or extra points now are missed far more frequently than they were back when it was a simple 15-yard kick. So we've seen changes in the past, of course. We've seen altercations to the ability to review penalties that came and went. We saw a ton of changes to the kickoff, but it never was really visual. It wasn't really visual. It was more the outcome that was changed. They purposely made the kickoff more directed towards being touchback oriented. This is now being directed towards return oriented. So let's take a look at the graphic here. This is what the new kickoff is going to look like starting right off the bat, week 1 on that Thursday night game, with a now Friday game, by the way. We're going to have, speaking of all these changes, there was a lot more that came out of this owners meeting than I anticipated. I knew that they were going to be ruling on this stuff, but there's a lot of also little things that came out too. It kind of reminds me of WWDC for Apple. I'm a huge Apple geek, big tech guy, and I love the keynotes that they do. And every year Apple does one or two where they announce new products, new software. This reminds me an awful lot of that, because it's all the big wigs getting together announcing all of these new things. One of the things that came out today was that the NFL is going to be playing a game in Brazil, and that's going to be on Friday of week 1. So you're going to have your Thursday night opening game. Then you're going to have a Friday game. I believe it's the Philadelphia Eagles versus, it might be the Chargers. I know the Eagles for sure are playing, but it's going to be in Brazil on Friday. So even better now. Week 1 of the NFL, you get a Thursday game, you get a Friday game, you get your full slate of Sunday, and of course, Monday. So this is going to start right off the bat. Here it is. So as you can see on your screen, the field is the graphic in the middle here. The red line here is indicated as the spot in which the ball will be placed if the kickoff does not reach the landing zone, which is indicated on this graphic by the dark yellow color here. This little dot here, which is at the 35-yard line, is going to be the kicker. So as you can see, the biggest notable change from a visual standpoint is that the kicker is isolated. The kicker is by himself at the 35-yard line. His nearest teammate is 20 yards up the field. The returning team is all the way up there as well at their own, or at their own 35-yard line. So you're kicking from the opposite 35. The returning team is entirely lined up at the 35 for the most part, with these two black dots in the yellow zone indicated as the two returners for the returning team. So the kicker's standing here at the 35 solo. He kicks off the ball. Here's where it gets interesting, and it almost turns into a game within a game. And as we know, that's basically, the NFL is like this so much. There are so many little games within the game. This is quite literally almost like a mini game. You know how when you're playing Madden and you can go and play the mini games? You can go and run through the dummy defenders. You can throw balls through the targets. This is kind of how this comes across to me. Because the way that the ball is kicked off can determine where the team starts with the ball. It also forces the returning team, should the ball land in the yellow zone and be returned, it forces them to return it. You no longer can fair catch the ball and start at the 25. That's gone. So the kicker's right here at the 35. He boots the ball. Okay, great. If the ball goes out of the end zone, which we have come accustomed to seeing nearly every time a ball is kicked now, like I just mentioned, 78% of all kickoffs last year were not returned. So say the ball isn't returned. Instead of the ball going to the 25-yard line, and remember, that was a change that came out of the owners' meeting. I don't know how long ago now. You could tell me it was 5 years ago. You could tell me it was a decade ago. I'd believe you. But if we remember however long ago it was, the standard forever was that a touchback on a kickoff brought the ball out to the 20. One of the major changes they made to try and make the play safer and incentivize taking the touchback was allowing the returning team to start at the 25. And we had saw that was also in pursuit of making the games higher scoring. The offense has a 5-yard advantage than they previously did. It incentivized both sides. It's going to help with scoring with better field position. It's going to help with less injuries and kickoffs, incentivizing the returning team to not return it at all. Now, it's not a 5-yard incremental increase like it was from the 20 to the 25. If we go back to what it was like growing up, we're now looking at a 15-yard difference compared to what the OG kickoffs used to be. An OG kickoff for a touchback brought the ball out to the 20. If the ball this coming season and for the foreseeable future is kicked directly out of the end zone, the returning team will start with the ball at the 35. Really think about that in itself for a second. That is massive. We all know how huge it is when a kicking team boots the ball out of bounds and the opposing team immediately starts with the ball on the 40 because of the penalty of kicking the ball out of bounds. You're only starting now 5 yards shy to that if there's a kickback, if there's a touchback. The difference between the 35 and the 25 is pretty damn sizable. And that's where the ball is going to start now, should there be a touchback. So what's weird about this is the kickoffs, as we have known them the last several seasons, really forever, I guess you could say. Yeah, I mean, that would be the better way to put it, forever. The incentive for the kicker, 99% of the time, was to boot that thing as far as you possibly can and get it out of bounds. Don't allow them the opportunity to run it back. Don't allow them the opportunity to score. Have them set up shop, and we'll take it from there. Very worst case scenario, you start at the 25. That's what 80% of the kickoffs resulted in last year. But if you put all your leg into the kicks now, and say you're Tyler Bass and you boot that baby right out of the back of the end zone, starting team, the team is starting with the ball on the 35-yard line now. You are now what? Once you start with the ball off of a touchback, you are now 25-ish yards away from a field goal attempt, depending on the type of kicker you have. So there's no longer an incentive to boot this ball out of bounds. In fact, you'd argue it's probably the last thing you want to do outside of the next rule. The ball will be placed at the 40-yard line if the kickoff does not reach the landing zone. Now, this to me doesn't seem like it'll happen very often. You have professional NFL kickers kicking the ball from the 35 here. It's hard for me to think that the average kick is not going to go 55, 60 yards like it would need to in order to reach this landing zone. But for whatever reason might cause this to happen, say it's a pooch kick, say the kicker doesn't get his whole leg into it, he just misses it, he whiffs on it, whatever. Say the ball doesn't reach the landing zone, and this, of course, also means kicking it out of bounds. The ball's at the 40. So I doubt we see this come into play often just because I don't think kickers are going to miss this landing zone. The majority of kicks just find their way going so deep they go out of the back of the end zone. I highly doubt we see kickers flat out miss the area between the 20-yard line and all the way through the back of the end zone. So I'm guessing the majority of the time when you see the ball get placed at the 40-yard line for it not reaching the landing zone, it's going to be your standard kick out of bounds penalty type scenario, ball at the 40. So it's certainly a factor, and I guarantee you at some point we'll see it for whatever reason, whether it's weather related or, I mean, I guess late in the game, if somebody wants to try a pooch type kick or a squib kick and it doesn't reach, that could be a factor. But I would argue 85, 90% of kicks, you're not going to have to worry about the ball being placed at the 40, unlike unless it occurs in a similar fashion to how it has in the past year, goes out of bounds. And that happens how often? A couple times a year at the most. So a factor, but certainly not anything I anticipate seeing often. Now, here's where the incentive of this new kickoff is entirely based around, I would say. This whole setup is based around the third line on your screen here on this graphic. The ball will be placed at the 20 if it hit, or these last two, I should say. It's based on these last two. The ball will be placed at the 20 if it hits the landing zone and rolls into the end zone. So that would mean the kicker would have to kick it into this yellow area, as you see on your screen. They'd have to kick it into that area. It would have to land in that area. And then it would have to roll backwards into the end zone for a touchback. The danger in that, however, and why I don't foresee this happening very often either, is because the kicking team is no longer having to go the length of the field to go and try and recover a fumble, which, of course, that would be ruled the second the ball lands on a kickoff. That's a live ball on a NFL kickoff, right? You now have the kicking team and the opposing team a mere 5 yards apart. So once that ball lands, you'd have to imagine, one, it would be a tough sell to get the kicker to try and pin the ball within that 20-yard margin and then have it bounce, right? So once again, this is just an element that I don't see happening all that frequently unless the receiving team noticeably sees the ball coming and about to hit the 5-10 yard line. They don't want to take the chance of returning it, and they just let it roll. Maybe we see this a bit, but I don't feel like this is going to be as common of an occurrence as the top two here. The ball being at the 35 on a touchback, and then the receiving of it in the landing zone. So here's where it gets interesting, and this was the primary goal of this new rule change, of this new kickoff. If the kicker boots the ball into the landing zone and it is fielded by the receiving team, it has to be returned. So like I just previously said, you can't fair catch it. You can't take a knee. You can let it bounce, but you're doing that at your own risk. If you field the ball between the inch line and the 20-yard line, you have got to return it. Now, once you return that ball, you now have your blockers lined up at the 35. You have the kicking team lined up at the 40. As soon as you field that ball, it's live. None of these guys in the red area and the blue area on the field, none of these guys can move until that ball is fielded or hits the ground. So the goal within this was to eliminate the kicking team running the length of the field to go and tackle a guy with all that momentum behind him. And that's not even including tackling the returner. That's also including the kicking team getting about a 15-yard head start to go and run into the receiving team's blockers. You're just nailing guys left and right. That's just essentially what the kickoff is. It's team v team, all out. I don't even know how to describe it. You all just run into each other. That's what it was. It's you don't really see that in football other than this play. On snap to snap, everybody's lined up in front of each other. That's primarily who you're hitting. Every now and then you get a nice downfield block or a big hit down the way. But 99% of the time, you're not getting a massive head start like that to go and nail everybody in front of you. And that's what the NFL wanted to get rid of. And that's what they really have gotten rid of. But it got rid of the kickoff itself in a pseudo type manner. So now you're able to return it without having that element of everybody running full force into one another and just doing what Mark just said here, Braveheart style. That's essentially what it is. It's literally Braveheart. We used to do this back in my lacrosse days, the Bravehearts, where you roll the ball out and you'd have to go and try to get the ground ball against the defender. One guy would be 10 yards away from the other guy, and you just run full force and try to go get it. That's essentially what every kickoff was, except you have superhuman athletes doing it down the length of a football field, right? So this is what you're going to primarily see, I think. The interesting thing about the ball being placed at the 35 on touchbacks is the incentive is for the kicker to put this ball in the landing zone. How is that going to change the psychology of the kicker? How is that going to change the overall approach a kicker takes when he goes up for this kickoff? I mean, think about that. Some of these guys in this league, Justin Tucker, how long has Justin Tucker been in the league now? 15 years? Something like that? On a dime, his goal now is to plop this ball. Your primary goal is really to get this ball from the 10-yard line to the inch line. So you go from wanting to essentially kick this ball through the opposite uprights to now wanting to do what a punter is typically aiming to do, and that's aim the ball in a very certain spot for the most desirable outcome. Because if you kick this ball, say you land it right at the 10, that's your ideal kick because it gives you more field to work with to try and pin them within the 25. If that ball lands at the 20, you're pretty much guaranteed to get the ball up to the 27 to 30 yard line. I can't imagine putting your absolute burners back there, fielding it at the 20 with these guys being completely stagnant until you touch it and not being able to get 10 yards on a full head of steam. I don't see it, right? The thing that interests me the most out of all of this, and I don't know how you guys feel. Let me know down in the comments how you feel. I'm going to read a couple in a second because I'm seeing you guys giving your thoughts. The most interesting element to me about this whole thing is the ball being placed at the 35 on a touchback. That is a wild, wild change. It will all but guarantee more offense. I don't know how it can. We saw an uptick in offense right after the ball started being placed at the 25 from the 20. I mean, you're a slant route away now from being at midfield. I mean, really think about that. You're a decent first down pass away from being at midfield as soon as you start the drive. So say the Bills are playing the Chiefs and Harrison Butker boots the ball out of the back of the end zone. The Bills take over at the 35. Josh Allen hits Dalton Kincaid on a crosser for a first down, and they're at the logo. Now, that's going to be very, very interesting at the late stages of the games. But I'm more thinking about it from the overall dichotomy of the longevity of the game. I mean, think about the first quarter, the first kickoff, right? Think about the first kickoff of the game. Butker boots it out of bounds. Josh Allen hits Dalton Kincaid, whoever, over the middle. 12-yard gain. And we're not talking anything crazy here. Obviously, you'd love a 12-yard gain, but it's not like it's a gigantic rarity. The Bills were dinking and dunking all down the field towards the end of the season. So you could realistically, by the 14.5-minute mark of the first quarter, you could be at the 50-yard line, and that could be commonplace. What was a rarity forever could now very well be common. Teams could very well be at the midfield line within the first minute of the game on a very routine basis, especially if you have an elite quarterback and an elite offense. Now, what's going to come of that? Like I just said, these teams are set up to be scoring. If you get the ball at the 35 to start the game or to start your drive, you're going to need, let's just talk about some of the best kickers in the league. We'll stick with the Justin Tucker theme, right? So say you get the ball at the 35. You're going to realistically need 5, 10, 15. You're going to need about depending on your kicker, you're going to need about, 20 yards to be in field goal range? You're basically now 2 first downs away off of a touchback from being in field goal range. Whereas just last season, 2 first downs wouldn't even have you over midfield. That is a massive, massive, massive change. I know it's just a couple of yards here and a couple of yards there, but folks, this is the game of inches, ain't it? You're now 2 first downs away, depending on the type of kicker you have, from being in field goal range. Not only is that massive for the duration of the entire football game, but think about how massive that is in the late stages of the football game. Let's go back to the dreaded 13-second moment, shall we? The only reason that to this day is so insane The only reason that the Chiefs pulling that off in the 13-second span that they did is so unbelievable is because they start with the ball at the 25 and get into field goal range with 13 seconds. If that happened today in 2024, sure, it would be incredible gaining the 20-some yards you'd need in 13 seconds in order to get the field goal off. Sure, it's still a massive play. Is it like legendary, though? Is it, oh my God, I can't believe they did that? Is it coining the game the 13-second game because of what we just saw? Does the game get a name attached to it? My opinion, probably not. Because I expect with a timeout or two, or hell, maybe not even, I just expect with 13 seconds or so, if I got Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, I can get 20 yards in 13 seconds. And Harrison Butker, he can kick a field goal from around the 45-yard line. I mean, we just saw it last year against these Bills, against the Eagles. The Eagles got down to before the end of regulation in the pouring rain into a 60-yard field goal range, and they drained it. Kickers are making deeper and deeper field goals every single year. What used to be mesmerizing at the 50-yard mark is no longer mesmerizing. It's routine. So it's really the game. There's a lot more on the shoulders of the kicker, I guess I'll just say. The kicker already had a massive job, of course, being the field goal kicker. We already know the amount of pressure put on them in those high-pressure situations. But there's way more to think about on the kickoff now than there ever was. Especially in these late-game situations. Because there is no incentive anymore to boot the ball out of the back of the end zone. And I just find that to be a dramatic change amongst all of these little changes that have culminated into this drastic overhaul of what we've come to know of the league. That, to me, by far, is the biggest element that stands out the most. Because starting with the ball at the 35 is insane to me. You imagine, like, giving the ball to Josh Allen at the 35. I mean, these guys are going to be racking points up. The NFL saw a decrease in scoring last year. I don't think that had anything to do with the rules and how they were set up. I think it had a lot to do with the inadequate quarterback play. The quarterback play last year was brutal. That had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of great quarterbacks last year suffered long-term injuries. And I think we saw scoring decrease because of that. You're going to see a hell of a lot more scoring this year. How much more, I don't know. I can't imagine it's insignificant, though. I feel like we're going to see a significant increase in scoring. I just don't know how this does not result in that. But it all depends on how these kickers are going to approach this play, I suppose. Because you have to think throughout the training camp coming up here in the summer, the entirety of the camp for these kickers is going to be spent avoiding kicking touchbacks. This is essentially reversing the mindset that kickers have had for pretty much forever. And I know I said it's going to be massive changes for hardened veterans, like guys like Justin Tucker, but even college kickers coming into the league, their incentive was still to boot it out of the back of the end zone in college. I mean, that's what it's been forever. So it is incredibly interesting to say the least. Now, I think I kind of like it. And I guess I won't know if I fully like it until I see how it affects the game. Is that not fair to say? Everybody's already kind of throwing their opinions out there in pen, but we haven't seen how this is directly going to affect NFL football. I will say the elements I do like of it are you're going to see way more kick returns, which is great because, as we've talked about all throughout the beginning of the show here, those were essentially eliminated from the game. So you're going to see a lot more kick returns. You're going to see a lot more strategy be placed on a play that really had no strategy implemented into it at all, because it was a throwaway play, really. What was the strategy the last couple of seasons on kickoffs? Kick the ball as far as you can, send the offense and the defense out on the field. That was the strategy. You now have multiple mini games implemented into this kickoff, and with every game comes a strategy. I mean, if you think about it, the way that this graphic is set up, it looks like an arcade game. Starting line for both teams, and then here's your areas of, like essentially like if you're playing skee ball and you have your areas where this little circle is worth this amount of points, this circle is worth this amount of points. This is kind of what this is. It's like a punt, pass, kick competition. And each one of these variables within this new setup has massive outcomes on the game. The difference between the ball hitting the landing zone and going out of bounds, or just going out or out of the back of the end zone, the difference between that and the ball just straight up going out of the end zone, we're talking a 15-yard difference. That is huge. Think about it. If and these are the things you just know are going to happen at some point and are going to have a dramatic effect on the game. So say Tyler Bass kicks the ball and the ball lands at the 2-yard line and rolls out of bounds. Say it's late in the game. Bills are up. They got to maintain the lead with 2 minutes left to win the game. And Tyler Bass kicks the ball. It lands at the 2-yard line and rolls out of the back of the end zone. Opposing team starts at the 20. Doesn't get much better than that. But if Tyler Bass kicks that same kick, and instead of it hitting the 2-yard line, it travels 2 yards further and hits the end zone, that same team gets the ball 15 yards further up the field. And in a late, tight game where every single yard is critical to get into scoring position, this is going to be massive. And the effect it's going to have on the game, it's going to be huge. I mean, can't you see it now? Oh my God, there's no way he kicked that out of the back of the end. I mean, can't you see yourself now standing in the end zone at the Ralph, big game, and the ball lands like a yard past the goal line and it's a touchback, and they get the ball at the 35. Had they had gotten it at the 20 or whatever, they would never have gotten into field goal range. It's a whole different ball game. You can just see it. It's inevitable. So this is crazy. Like the difference. Now here is this is via John Boys on Twitter. This is more of a written down, described the way each thing works type layout here, as opposed to the graphic. The onside kick situation now becomes interesting. We don't see him there very often, and we certainly don't see successful onside kicks very often. But the way onside kicks are now going to be set up. In fact, let me go back to what I had a video here earlier. It was from Jeff Darlington, who kind of has a nice graphic here. The way it's painted out here, it kind of shows you. Now, this was posted before the rule was officially implemented, so there could be a little bit of variance within here. But this is going to be how the overtime is going to be, or excuse me, the onside kick is going to be implemented within this new type of kickoff.
Target zone, the area from the 20-yard line to the goal line. The next proposal would also impact the kickoff. After only 5.2% of onside kicks were recovered in 2023, and just 2 surprise onside kicks, the competition committee is looking for some give and take. The new rule would allow the kicking team to utilize an unbalanced formation with 6 players on one side of the kicker and 4 on the other to raise the odds of a recovery. But in order to do so, the kicking team would be required to declare their intentions of an onside kick before the play. That's necessary since that other kickoff proposal has a new setup zone. As a result of these proposals,
does that make sense? So I guess the biggest takeaway from that, you can no longer do a surprise onside kick. So, like, remember what the Saints did to the Colts way back in the day in the Super Bowl to start the second half? Surprise onside kick, changed the whole game. Saints win. Like, you can't do that anymore. That's gone. Let's watch that back. This is a little bit confusing. Like I said, this is going to take a little while to really get the hang of.
The competition committee is looking for some give and take. The new rule would allow the kicking team to utilize an unbalanced formation with 6 players on one side of the kicker and 4 on the other to raise the odds of a recovery. But in order to do so, the kicking team would be required to declare their intentions of an onside kick before the play. That's necessary since that other kickoff proposal has a new setup zone. As a result of these proposals...
So essentially what you would get from that is what you would get on the onside would be you'd have you'd split the field at the hashes, essentially. You'd split the field and you'd have 6 players on one side of the hash and 4 players on the other side. But you have got to declare to the ref and the opposing team prior to it that you are performing an onside kick. Now, what effect this has, if any, I'm not sure, because onside kicks, the way that they've gone up until now, have been pretty much a moot point to begin with. I mean, they just don't work. They just never, ever work. Will this make them work more? The way that that's laid out to me, I don't see it working more, but I guess the way that it is set up, there's less guys to have to deal with to recover your own kick. Now, of course, you have less guys to recover your own quick kick as well, but it's still less defenders. What that comes out to be, who knows? Let's go to your comments. Let's see how you feel. Like I said, to me, I have got to see this before I have a definitive take. And I guarantee you by the time the 1 p.m. window comes to a close on opening weekend of week 1 of the NFL season in 2024, I promise you I will have some sort of definitive take. I just know for a fact. But what I'm seeing here at first glance, 1, I can't lie, I'm excited about the idea of more scoring because my team, our team, has the quarterback to do it. I'll tell you this, if I was a fan of a team that was defense-oriented with a very shaky situation at quarterback, this would have me sick. Because the better quarterback you have, the better offense you have, the better you're set up to take advantage of how this new rule is set up in itself. The worse offense you have, the more screwed you are because the opposing team, if their offense is better than yours, is going to be set up to score a hell of a lot more. So from our perspective, from the Bills' perspective, we got Josh Allen. If he's getting the ball at the 35 on a routine basis, sign me up. But just keep in mind, the other team is going to have the opportunity to do the same as well. So it's a give and take there, but I will say I'm excited about the idea of what's to come on the scoreboard from that type of outcome within the kickoff. I am excited to see more returns in that landing zone. I think that is something the game has been missing. Nothing cooler than seeing a kick return, and I guarantee you with this new rule, we see a hell of a lot more of them. But overall, I would say the word to me to describe this whole thing is intriguing. I'm more intrigued to see on the overall outcome and impact that it has on this game. Because I guarantee you, it's going to be felt, and it's going to be felt early and often. The NFL, as it is today, this changes the NFL. There's no other way to put it. Other changes in the past, like, yes, it's changed the game, like moving the extra point back has certainly changed the game. A lot of teams now are more incentivized to go for 2. A lot of outcomes of games have been dramatically altered because of teams' inability to kick deeper extra points. We've seen that. But this is about as major and drastic of a change as you can make without completely altering the fundamentals of the game itself. I mean, in reality, this really is altering the fundamentals of the game. The fundamentals of football were circulated around the kickoff the way it was during its inception, essentially. This is truly rewriting the game, so to speak. I mean, I don't really know how else to say it. And when you change the game is going to be changed. What that's going to be, what the outcome of that's going to be, is to be determined. But I can't imagine it results in anything other than more points on the board and a lot more drama. And I feel like there's nothing the NFL and the owners want more than that. And that's what they're getting. That's what they're getting. This heightens drama. Every kickoff now has something to it. And I can see it now. If you're a gambling man like me, if you love to throw some coin on the games, I guarantee you're going to be able to bet on the kickoff landing in the landing zone, on the kickoff being a touchback, on the kickoff being returned. You're going to be able to bet on all of it. Like I said, this is essentially a mini game within the broader game. You're going to be able to bet on it, and you're going to be able to sit there and have every reason in the world to pay massive attention to each and every kickoff. From the NFL side of things, put your fandom aside for the second. Put aside the fact that you love this or hate it, okay? Put yourself into the shoes of the NFL execs. I mean, this is pure blown genius. This is genius. This is giving them everything that they want from the higher up perspective, from the business perspective. Anything you could possibly want to be increased within the game is coming as a result of this new kickoff. You're going to get increased retention from the audience. You're going to get an increased betting market, guaranteed. You're going to get an increase in scoring. I can't imagine that's all but guaranteed with this. You're going to get an increased level of drama based on the fact that each kick now has a massive result on the ensuing drive, depending on where that ball lands. This is an NFL executive's dream. I think it was voted 29-3 in favor, and that got it done. There's no secret as to why that they did this. And not to mention the bow on top, the bow to wrap up the present here, is it is a much safer style of kickoff than the traditional kickoff that we had become accustomed to seeing prior to touchbacks essentially taking over the game and kickoffs being eliminated. So it's weird to have it kind of sit. Like, it's weird to, I would say, fully comprehend how big of a change this is, because it's March 26th and we are, let's see, when's the Hall of Fame game? April, May. I mean, we're like 4 or 5 months from even seeing this put on display in an NFL setting. So it's hard to understand how big of an impact this is going to have, because we have a long time until we see that impact be felt. This is huge. And the other weird thing too is, like, if you're not a massive NFL fan, like if you're not like us, if you're not like everybody who's in here right now, or people who watch NFL content during the offseason, or people who do NFL content like me in the offseason, like if you are a casual fan who shows up in September and leaves in February, like, you might not even know that this is happening until the season starts. Do you know how many people are going to sit down for week 1 of the NFL season and be like, what the hell is this? What is going on? That's a real thing too. I promise you right now, there's a large portion of the NFL fan base as it stands right now who has no idea this is going to happen. It's going to get smaller and smaller as time goes on and people start to learn what has occurred here. But there's also going to be a very sizable chunk of the NFL fan base who's going to sit down week 1 and be like, what in the hell is going on here? The visual of this is going to be so dramatically different. Like, it is going to feel weird. It is going to feel drastically different. And that's going to take some getting used to. Let's go to your comments. Let's take a look at what you guys are feeling, how you guys feel about this updated kick. Richie's saying the NFL thinks they are exempt from diluting their game. People will watch no matter what they do. That's a reality. No matter what the NFL does, no matter what they change, the ratings are going like this every year. The NFL, they are in, I don't know if there's a .com bubble to this. I don't think that there is. Because they're in that type of era right now where it's just like the stock market, it is a cruise missile upwards, and it's got no landing point. I mean, the landing point is whenever it gets sucked into a black hole 10 galaxies away. It's up, no matter what they do. I mean, for instance, last year, there's really no tangible way to prove this, but I feel like so many people are in agreement. Last year, the refereeing was terrible. It was awful. It just felt like last year was such a bad year for NFL officials. Ratings never been higher. Joe Burrow, season-ending injuries. Justin Herbert, season-ending injury. Kirk Cousins, season-ending injury. Multiple other injuries throughout the NFL at the quarterback position. Ratings have never been higher. It does not matter. And let's be real, this should only attribute to higher ratings for all of the reasons I just mentioned. Everything that comes from this is beneficial to the league office and the NFL. Now, part of me, the reason I'm a little bit excited about this is part of me thinks it could be beneficial to us fans. I think it might make the game more exciting. But time's only going to tell. And that, of course, is only going to be how I feel if it's benefiting the Bills. I mean, I guarantee you there's going to be some time in the future where you're going to sit down with me on a Monday night smoke break, and I'm going to be on here redder than an apple, bitching my face off because something happened on the kickoff that boned the Bills. It is all but inevitable. So let's just hope the majority of this new rule ends up playing in the favor of the Bills, because that's how I'll find myself judging my overall love of this or disdain of this. But like I said earlier, Bills are in as good a spot as anybody to be on the right side of history here. You know, if you're trotting into the coming league year, and you're the Las Vegas Raiders, right, or you're the Minnesota Vikings right now, teams don't even have a quarterback, don't know what they're doing. I mean, this is not good for you if the opposing team has the ability to be setting up shop in much better field position than in years past. And you have the same opportunity, but you just don't have the resources to take advantage of it. So Scotty coming in here with the super chat, and he's saying, imagine if they force it in the playoffs. That's a whole nother game, and a lot of teams are going to be pissed off about the rule in the playoffs. Oh, let me look this up. I don't know. This is a great point you're bringing up. Is this not in the playoffs? I thought this was the rule was adopted year long. It would be super odd if they. I'm looking this up right now. In fact, let me go to the comments. Maybe some of you guys know. I don't know if this is exactly what Scotty's saying, but it's making me thinking now. I didn't read this in any of the articles and all of the info I've seen on this. I feel like I would have saw this, but is this regular season only? I feel like this would have popped up. I feel like I would have seen this. Yeah, I mean, I got this up here. Yep. When does the new NFL kickoff rule start? This is via NBCNewYork.com. I'll share it here with you so you can see it. When does the new NFL kickoff rule start? The new NFL kickoff rules will debut in the preseason this summer and be used throughout the regular season and playoffs. So, not sure, Scotty, if that's what your question was, but if you're saying a lot of teams might be pissed about this rule in the playoffs, well, they might be, because this is the new. I mean, this isn't like just some beta product. You know, this isn't some beta period, some test product here. Like this is it. This is the league now. And it's not just regular season. It's not just preseason. Like, this is the NFL now. That's why I was just saying, like, this is going to be a major shock to people. It's not like they're going to just try this in the preseason and see how it goes. Like, folks, this is it. Welcome to the NFL. This is what the NFL is now. And it's damn different. Rebels saying this is terrible. Sorry, Rebels out on it. Does not like it. And you know for a fact there's going to be a lot of people on Rebels' side here not loving it. But like any change, there's going to be a line drawn in the sand, and people are going to be on either side. If you've watched me for long enough, you know that oftentimes I like to tread that line in the sand until I have a definitive reason to go on one side or the other of it. I'm treading that line right now. But I do always understand the feeling on either side. I understand wholeheartedly why you would hate this. I do. You've come to love this sport for however long. I mean, my man Jeff King here. Jeff King's been watching the Bills since the games were in black and white, for God's sakes. I mean, Jeff King watches the NFL for as long as it's been, for as long as the Bills have been kicking here. This has got to be major for my man Jeff King and folks of his age. I mean, I've been watching the NFL my whole life. I just turned 27 yesterday. This is drastic to me. If you're of my parents' age or older, I mean, this is crazy huge because you've been watching this way longer than I have. And you were watching this way before any of these changes were made, even the change to have the kickoff touchback go to the 25. I mean, this is a massive altercation to the game that we've come to know. Jeff's asking, I'm just curious if anyone can answer this because it's been 40 years since I've played the game. Are these rules already implemented in high school football? Not to my knowledge, Jeff. Not to my knowledge. I don't believe that this has been implemented in high school football. I think maybe some areas it has, certainly. But there's not a universal ruling, I don't think, on high school football. I mean, I feel like if you were to go to, say you drove to a small school district in Pennsylvania, or you drove to a small school district in Buffalo, there could be completely different ways of playing the game from that perspective. Obviously, there's not a drastic change in the value of a touchdown or stuff like that, but the way that stuff like this is played out, I guarantee you there's got to be some variance in the way that this is played out from school district to school district at the high school level. But what we do know, this isn't like this in college. Division I football does not have this in play, which is interesting because it always feels like we within the college game, for a lot, like you start to see the transition for major things start there, right? Not the case. I mean, as it stands right now, like a senior in college, this coming up season in college football, a senior in college so say you're a senior kicker at Penn State and you're going to get drafted to the league to be a kicker. For the entirety of your senior year in college, your goal is to boot that ball out of the back of the end zone. And then less than a year later, nope, mindset's same sport, but your job within that sport is essentially the complete opposite. We don't want you kicking it that far anymore. We want you kicking it within a 20-yard space. And we want you to kick it as deep as you can within that 20-yard space. But don't kick it too deep, or else we're going to lose 15 yards as a result of it. This is crazy big, man. Sal's thinking pro soccer players will be recruited. They are the best in ball kicking. Well, it makes you wonder now with the goal. The goal is no longer having the longest leg. I wonder if the field goal kickers will simply be just that, field goal kickers. I'm starting to wonder now if this changes the position entirely. I'm wondering, like, as we know, Tyler Bass kicks the field goal, then trots right back out and kicks the kickoff. I'm wondering now if you're going to have a kickoff specialist. Because the kickoff is now become, to me, it's become far more crucial to the game. And I don't know if you any longer have the ability to just say, oh, well, we already have our field goal kicker and he can kick it out of the back of the end zone. Why do we need another guy out here? So, Sal, to your point, maybe it's not a pro soccer player they go after, but I think your point still stands nonetheless. Maybe what comes of this is an entirely new type of kicker. Far more accurate, not necessarily based on distance, but based on that accuracy, ability to put the ball in a certain spot, kick it super high, So it gets there, whatever. I mean, you name it. Who knows? There's just going to be a lot that's going to come from this, I think. Richie's saying the game was as good as it gets the way it's been. It has been great. I can't lie. I personally, there was a lot of people who felt they genuinely missed the kickoff. Truth be told, it didn't really bother me at all. The touchbacks, who cares? I'll be straight honest with you. If they would have ruled, well, and I think that this was something that was considered. If they would have ruled, hey, you know what? The kickoff's just too dangerous and nearly 80% of all kicks aren't being returned. We're just going to get rid of it. You're going to start every team, every possession, no kickoff. You just start with the ball at the 25. There would have been people up in arms about it. How do you get rid of the kickoff? It's the staple of the game. You really, really wouldn't have noticed it. You wouldn't have noticed it. Because every time you go up to grab a bag of chips now or take a leak during the kickoff, it's the same result. Team trots out on the 25. So if they were to just gotten rid of that and start out on the 25, the only thing you're missing out on is that little extra period to go grab a beer. It wouldn't have really bothered me at all. Would it have been a bit sad to lose a staple within the game that has been part of it forever? Sure. But like anything else, you're going to get over it because the game has changed dramatically since then. The kickoff is now just a new thing to change. But this to me, as weird as this might sound, this is a far more dramatic change to the game than eliminating the kickoff itself would have been. I think this overall change to the kickoff is far more game altering than just getting rid of the kickoff itself would have been. Because there's so much at play here that can change a game from possession to possession, the way that this is now being laid out. Rebel saying there's going to be a lot of TDs on kick returns. I genuinely wonder if we're going to see an uptick or if we're going to see what we're going to see. I mean, that's why I'm sitting here more so excited and intrigued than I am hopping on one side or the other, because who's to say? I would imagine you're going to be right. I would tend to agree with you. The more you're returning the ball, the more you would imagine the odds go up to return it for a touchdown. So I feel like just the rule of probability will inevitably cause an increase in scoring here. But how much? Like, will we see an increase that's drastic? Like, where we see an all-time level of kick returns? That's what I'm wondering, right? Sal's really putting it the best here, and this is a kind of how I feel. You got to remember, with all of the changes that have come to the league, there was a point in time where somebody somewhere, a group of people, a large group of people, whatever, was up in arms about it. People were up in arms about moving the extra point back, right? People were up in arms about the ball even being placed at the 25-yard line instead of the 20. Like Sal's saying here, change is hard and everything. Give it a year. I agree. Weirdly enough, there's going to come a point in time where you're going to forget that this was even a change. But that's not to overshadow the fact that this is going to be, for this coming season at the least, and I would venture to say probably a little further beyond that, probably the next couple of years, but bare minimum this year, this is going to feel crazy, crazy different. And it's going to have an impact on the game. Certainly. And like Reese is saying, as we mentioned earlier, this is another thing that isn't necessarily being thrusted to the forefront because you don't see a lot of onside kicks anymore. But this is gone. Scrolling through a couple more comments here. Like Richie's saying, I mean, this was my piss and beer time, the kickoff. Not anymore. I'm dialed in on the kickoff now. I am lasered in on the kickoff. Johnny's foreseeing a superhuman coming to the kicking position. He's foreseeing like a Josh Allen type kicker. 6+ foot tall, 200+ pound dude. I mean, Johnny's foreseeing like the next wave of superhuman type kickers. Maybe that's what we see. Okay. This is one. I mean, we just spent an hour on this. I think deservingly so, because this was a major, major change. But there is another major change that I feel like is, I don't know, it's awfully controversial, and it deservingly so. It is controversial. And I know for a fact, speaking of having an altercation on the game itself, speaking of being pivotal to the outcomes of games, I know for a fact this next topic we're gonna talk about, at some point in the near future, it is going to be the talk of the town because it affected a game one way or the other. It's just all but inevitable. It's yet one more personal foul being looked for by the refs. We'll talk about the hip drop tackle in just a second. But before we do, want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's live video, and that is, of course, my friends over at BetUS. Link in the description below, and that'll get you 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500 using the promo code JOIN125. Now, if you're like me, you got in on the action all weekend for March Madness. And let's just say, I hope it goes better in the Sweet 16 than it did for me in the second round. Many of you joined me for my first round watch party for March Madness, and it was a lot of fun. And if you had, you know that I have been betting on the underdog in every single March Madness game up until this point. Now, this started off extremely well. I started off doing 1 unit on every game. And in the first round, I mean, it really could not have went better. I ended up finishing the first round being up 14 units, which is crazy. So I carried that same strategy into round 2. Folks, I went 1-15. If you were following the tournament over the weekend, the favorites in the NCAA men's basketball tournament went 15-1. Now, luckily for me, I was smart, and I said I got to preserve some winnings from round 1 into round 2, and I only did a half a unit in round 2. So lost a little bit, but still did very well in round 1, and we're taking those winnings into the Sweet 16. And you can hop in on the action, too, this coming Thursday and Friday. We got some great freaking basketball coming up. Arizona Clemson's going to be awesome. Gonzaga, Purdue, Zach Edey's been eating this tournament. They've been doing exceptionally well, but Gonzaga, an underdog in that game, but they've been playing really well. Duke, Houston is going to be awesome. Houston almost lost up 13 points the other night with a minute left. The buzzer beater from Texas A&M. That game was nuts. All these games are set to be incredible. You can hop in on the action if you'd like over at BetUS. Link in the description below. 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500 with the promo code JOIN125. There's one more thing I'm doing for my listeners who are watching right now. Nobody else, just you guys watching right now. If you don't have a BetUS account and you'd like one, if you go and sign up through that link and you go to my Twitter and you DM me a screenshot showing me your username on BetUS, I will send you a $25 free play. I have 4 more spots open, 4 more free $25 free plays available. So if you go sign up, not only do you get that deposit bonus and all that cool stuff, but I will send you a $25 free play if you come to my Twitter and DM me a screenshot of your account. I have 4 more slots left. So first come, first serve. If you want that, make sure to get in on it. Quick word from BetUS, and then we're going to talk about this hip drop tackle, and I'm dying to see what you guys think about it.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
All right, so let's talk about what else came out of the NFL owners meeting. I mean, I know we just spent an hour on that kickoff. I feel like I could have spent like 2 hours on that. I am genuinely blown away with the idea of what's to come with this new rule. I feel like in my lifetime, this is as drastic of a change as you could see in the sport. And with that comes a lot of, thoughts about what's going to come, what's going to be the result of that. We know as it stands right now in the NFL that plenty of plays, plenty of drives, and ultimately plenty of outcomes of games are altered or swung one side or the other based on a play call or a penalty call here or a penalty call there. Sometimes it's incredibly justified. Chiefs, Bills, when you had Kadarius Toney offside, was it Kadarius Toney? I think so, right? MVS, I can't even remember. Whatever. When the Chiefs were offsides on that play, clearly offsides, clearly the right call. It altered the game, but it was the right call. But, you go back to the playoffs a handful of years ago, the play that ultimately implemented the ability to review pass interference, Rams Saints, one of the most egregious non-calls in the history of the sport, right? We've seen time and time again, plays result in penalties that end up resulting in major shifts in momentum, major shifts in the game, especially personal fouls, the 15-yard penalties. So we see that with the roughing the passer, the pass interference, right? That in itself has been a big complaint amongst this NFL fan base forever. They're massive, massive penalties. With pass interference, it's spot foul. It's about as big of a penalty as you can commit, depending on where you commit it and where you're at in the football game and what the outcome comes from that. I mean, it could be a massive game-altering penalty. But another one that's been a massive point of conversation, a huge factor on the game, is the increased protection on the quarterback that has resulted in an increase in penalties thrown on roughing the passer. Well, what I'm getting at is we've seen time and time again that these personal fouls have impacted the game, and they are called quite frequently. It's not like they're a rarity. We see these week in and week out, game in and game out. And oftentimes they are subjective. That is the toughest part about being an NFL ref. That's the toughest part about policing this sport. Many times from play to play, there's holding on every play. It just depends on how egregious it was, and it depends on whether or not the ref calls it. When there's pass interference, how many times do you see that and say, that is BS, that's not pass interference? Or on the other side of things, you see it and you say, you got to be kidding me. There is no way they didn't call a flag on that. It's so subjective. And we've seen that trickle in more and more with roughing the passer, where a quarterback gets hit a little high, quarterback takes a brush on the helmet, quarterback gets landed on a little too awkwardly, and it's 15 yards. There's already so many plays in a game that can result in a 15-yard penalty, and they're all subjective. But the NFL is now, instead of pursuing solutions for those plays already in play that have not only had a major impact on the way that the games play out themselves, but have been a major emphasis of complaint amongst the fan base, and more than likely have led to increased disdain towards the way the game is policed. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, last year, it felt like it was one of the worst years on record for NFL officiating. So instead of trying to find ways to make it simpler for these NFL refs to get the call right, instead of finding ways to maybe dial back on the amount of penalties called, there is now a new personal foul implemented into the game that is as subjective as the rest of them. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. The NFL at the coaches and owners meeting voted on banning and making illegal the hip drop tackle. You might be wondering what exactly is a hip drop tackle. I don't blame you. I've watched it a bunch. I think by now I understand what it is, what it looks like. If you are unsure of what a hip drop tackle is or what that might look like, Tom Pelissero posted the video on Twitter that was showed at the press conference this past week here, in which the NFL used to then make their decision on whether or not to ban this tackle. Here is footage of the hip drop tackle in what is now going to result in a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down if carried out in a football game.
And unweighting yourself as a defender and landing on your opponent's legs. You've heard us say before that the injury rate, this sort of tackle compared to the typical tackle, is at least 20 times more. We came to that from reviewing about 20,000 videos of tackles. The injury rate, we see it 20 times the others. We see a time loss injury about once a week now, which is an increase year over year. We see the tackle occur about once a game, which is up 65% year over year. So it's increasing in frequency. The sorts of injuries, as you can see here, the high ankle sprains, the ligament injuries, fractures, lead to substantial time loss. So grateful after all the work that was done by the engineers and certainly by the health and safety team swivel.
So if you listen to the background of that, we'll listen to it again here.
Yourself as a defender and landing on your opponent's legs. You've heard us say before that the injury rate, this sort of tackle compared to the typical tackle, is at least 20 times more. We came to that from reviewing about 20,000 videos of tackles. The injury rate, we see it 20 times the others. We see a time loss injury about once a week now.
So this decision wasn't made in haste. I mean, as you just heard, I'm not sure who that is speaking in the background, but what they said was that type of tackle where you come in and tackle low on the waist, swing your body around, and essentially use your lower body to come down on the lower legs of the person with the ball and land on them so they come down. I mean, it's like so hard to explain. I mean, you saw it on there. I feel like if you watch it over and over, you get the vibe as to what exactly it is. But what they just said is that particular tackle in comparison to a normal tackle, whatever the hell that means, is 20 times more likely to result in an injury. They said they reviewed over 20,000 individual plays. And based on that, they were able to determine that that type of tackle resulted in a 20x injury rate that resulted in about one of those type of tackles per game, which they said is up 65%. One question I have is, why is it up? The reason it's probably up is because the higher you tackle, the more likely you are to get a couple of things. One, run over. Good luck trying to tackle Derrick Henry or any tight end in the league high. You're going to get run over. You got a cornerback half their size trying to tackle him from the ribs up. You're going to get Josh Norman, no question. Two, okay, say you are of equal size and of equal strength and you're able to tackle up high. What do we know happens when you tackle up high? Increased likelihood for your helmet to hit the helmet of the man with the ball. And what does that result in? Well, yeah, you guessed it, yet another 15-yard personal foul. This is so hard to tread the line on because you hear what the guy said in the background here as you watch these plays unfold. You hear him say that this tackle has resulted in a 20x injury rate. You can't have it. Like, you just can't. The lengths that they've gone to try to get rid of injuries, and we just spent an hour talking about one of them, because don't get it twisted, that new Kickoff is the 90% of the reason it exists is because of an attempt to decrease injuries. The pursuit that they've been on to try and decrease the injury rate has been so rampant that when you see a statistic like that, and you saw the amount of injuries that occurred last year, and most notable, I would say Mark Andrews, everybody saw that on Monday Night Football, or maybe not even him. And Nick Chubb, was he another one as well, perhaps? Maybe that was the most notable. Either way, there was a bunch of injuries. There's no way they weren't going to do something about it, right? They've done something about all the other ones. Anything to the head, anything late, right? Anything really that looks too egregious ends up getting a penalty. But here's the problem now. The only way that you can make a tackle is a form textbook type tackle that we all know is not able to be executed in every play of a game setting. Not every play in every game is simulated the way practice is, where you're doing a tackle drill and you and the opponent are set up between two cones and you can only go in between the cones and you work on your tackling and you work on breaking your tackles within that. We know the game is the game. Guys are going all over the place, using the length of the field, using whatever they can to try to get away from you. And when you're coming up from the side, like you're seeing in a lot of these plays here, you can't make a form tackle. If I'm a cornerback or if I'm a safety or whatever, and I got Derrick Henry in the open field, I'm not tackling him on a form tackle from the side. That's never, ever going to work. I'm going to get run over. This was pretty much the solution that many smaller players in the league, I mean, right here is, I feel like, a rarity. I feel like you see it less often from these larger players in the backfield. You see it a lot more in the open field from smaller cornerback safety type players tackling larger players. It was essentially a solution to get larger guys down on the ground without having to hit them high and without having the most textbook tackle on them because you don't have the proper angle. Is this play super dangerous the way that they use their lower body to come and put the entirety of their weight down on the guy who has the ball? Absolutely. But it just feels like the game itself is inherently dangerous. And we are now pretty much policing out of the game a variety of different elements that benefit the defense's ability to stop the offense. When we were just talking about the kickoff, if you were to really get down to it, I guarantee you when we have the entirety of the sample size of a season to look back on after this coming season concludes, we are going to come to find that the offense benefited significantly from these new kickoffs, just based on the field position. It seems like it's going to be all but inevitable. That's just one more thing that's been added to benefit the offense. Everything that has been added into the league over the last decade or so feels like it has been added to help benefit the offense. This is one more thing. There's going to be a time in the game where this is called, and it could be subjective, because how subjective do these look? They went ahead and found examples that all look very similar, but we all know that from game to game that this play and this type of tackle isn't going to look exactly like all the clips that they found within here. But you're still going to see a flag on the field, and they're going to call it personal foul, hip drop tackle defense, and we're going to go to the replay, and we're going to see it. We're going to be like, I don't know, just like we do with everything else. I don't know, Jim. I don't know if he had a pass. I don't know if he interfered with him there. I don't know, Jim. I don't know if he hit him late. I think the quarterback got rid of the ball, and I don't think he hit him all that late. I don't know, Jim. I don't know if he swung his legs all around and got him down with a hip drop tackle. It's just going to be one more of those. And it's going to be one more thing you got to fear when you're facing off against a team and you have to worry about them moving the ball down the field in ways that aren't done by actually moving the ball down the field. It's such a tough line to trend because nobody wants to have players injured, especially at an increased rate like that they were just referring to. But at the end of the day, you also have to sit back and wonder, like, did these guys, and you've heard so many players talk about this. I mean, even players that are in the trenches doing the dirtiest of the dirty work like J.J. Watt, right? These guys can't stand it. Will Compton of Barstool Sports, I'm sure you've seen him popped up before. They can't stand it. These defensive guys, they can't believe it. And how many injuries did J.J. Watt have in his career? They know what they signed up for. They know that every single play they're putting their body on the line. They know exactly what they're doing. You don't reach the pinnacle of the NFL making millions and millions of dollars every year if you aren't willing to do what these guys are willing to do on a weekly basis. They're going full head of steam, throwing their body on the line every snap of every game, and they're well aware that they're doing it. You are now making it. I don't know what the defense is supposed to do. This is, once again, this is where it comes tough to try and explain this, because I'm not sitting here saying I want to see the defense do things that cause injuries. I don't want to see that. But at the same time, what is the solution now? You can't hit high, because if you hit too high, it's going to be a helmet to helmet, and that's a personal foul. You also can't hit high enough to where if you're a smaller player going up against a Derrick Henry or a DK Metcalf or something, you're not going to make the tackle. You know, say I got a DK Metcalf catching the ball at the 10-yard line, and I'm the only cornerback back there, and it's between me and him in the goal line. If I only have an angle to go up high on him, he's going to run me the hell over. DK Metcalf is huge, so you can't get him down that way. And now you can't go low on an angle and bring your body in to make the tackle. Now, when you watch these clips, it seems like there's a very strategic move being made here with the lower body of the defense, and that's what's causing the injury. What my main point here is, I feel like what's going to come of this is that it's not going to just be these type of maneuvers that get flagged. I feel like, just like we see time and time again with pass interference and roughing the passer, what was meant to protect the player and what was meant to implement safety is going to be taken a level too far. Where now, if you accidentally put your hand on the quarterback after he throws it and he falls down, personal foul. If you make a form tackle on a quarterback and you land on him while you're going down on the ground, because that's how gravity works. If I'm on top of somebody and make a hit, I'm going to land where I'm on top of. That's a personal foul, right? If I even so much as brush my helmet against the opponent's helmet, not spearing them, not going full head into them, but if my helmet grazes his, especially the quarterback, personal foul. And then we all know with pass interference, it's anybody's guess as to when that's going to be called and when it isn't. You now have another play where if you hit a guy low enough and he comes straight down to the ground, and say your legs move while you're making that tackle, and you don't necessarily throw your legs into the guy and bring him down with your weight, but let's say the back judge right there, that ref right there, say that, let's go back to this example on your screen right here. This example right here. Okay, say I'm this back judge right here. Say I'm this back judge, and this safety right here is making the tackle, okay, like he is now. And he does exactly what he does here, but it's not necessarily a penalty. He makes the tackle and his legs come around the side, but he doesn't use them like the way that they're talking about in these videos. That back judge can't see that. All that back judge sees is a guy going low and swinging his body around, personal foul. And how many of those do we feel like we're going to see time and time and time again? Well, I can only base it on what I've seen from pass interference and roughing the passer. And folks, we all know we're seeing that multiple times a game, nonstop. I don't know what the result is. It's so hard to have a proper solution, because I feel like they're trying to police this game in a way that completely goes against the inherent nature of what the game is. This game is predicated on a guy with a ball trying to avoid getting hit by another guy without the ball. No other game is like that. No other sport in America, I mean, other than rugby, and we're not a big rugby country, but if you haven't noticed, the NFL is dominating the states. It is America's pastime, not even a remote argument. It's the most popular sport in the country by a country mile. And it's the only sport that requires nailing each other. It's the only sport that requires tackling someone and burying them to the ground. That's football. That is football. It is the game. The game is to tackle the guy with the ball. And there's so many rules implemented now. It's just, it's not, they're trying to ref this game as if it's not the game that it actually is. Does that make sense? I know that is a word salad, but they are trying to police this game as if the game wasn't based around what it's based around. And unfortunately, I know they don't want to say it, but that's violence. It's a violent game. You have grown-ass superhuman men running after each other. One guy, all he cares about in that moment is getting your ass on the ground. That guy is getting paid anywhere between $1 million to $30 million a year to hit your ass as hard as he possibly can. The guy with the ball, he's getting paid more than that guy, and his only goal is to run right through your ass. That's the game. That's football. And the way it's now being policed, I just find it inherently unfair to the defense. Injuries are an unfortunate reality of this sport. When you have grown, superhuman, 250-pound, 6'5" men clashing into one another 80 times a game, you're going to get banged up. I don't know how else to say it. And it's not like they're being held against their will to do it. These guys are out there and they want to be out there. And they're capable of being out there because if they weren't, they wouldn't be out there. And they know what's on the line every snap. Every one of them out there knows exactly what they signed up for. Now, I'm not saying, like, for instance, going back to the kickoff, if you can inherently change things so that the play itself is less dangerous, okay, that's great. I don't know how you can inherently change the way a player tackles because it's such a spur of the moment thing. Any of these guys will tell you, one, nobody is ever going into a tackle with the intent of hurting somebody. Nobody has ever gone into, or I don't want to say, you know what I'm saying. We've seen shit before. These guys, 99.999% of guys, their mindset isn't, I'm going to go hurt this guy. I'm going to go end this guy's career. Maybe way back in the olden days, but we all know that this NFL, modern day NFL, it's like a gigantic fraternity. All these guys are friends with each other. The free agency has now made it so guys go from team to team. They spend time in the offseason. You know that, like Mark's saying. Yeah, like we've seen the bad apples for sure. But let's be, we know what I'm saying. 99% of the league, there's no intent on hurting somebody. They know what the other guys out there to do. They know what they're out there to do. They know they're putting their body on the line. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to hurt somebody else. These guys are way nicer, considerate human beings than you'd imagine. Even though they're out there destroying each other, they're considerate human beings, okay? Right? So they have two goals in mind. One goal in mind and one goal not in mind. The goal not in mind, I'm not trying to hurt this guy. No intention. The goal in mind, get this guy on the ground. My job, if I am a defender, I am getting paid millions of dollars to do one thing. Get that guy on the ground when he comes my way. Your job has now gotten infinitely harder. I don't know how a guy like Kyer Elam, for example, is supposed to get Derrick Henry on the ground in an open field if he can't go low on him. Now, you might say, well, you can still go low, Zeba. You just, you can't do the hip drop tackle. We all know there's going to be flag after flag thrown that isn't necessarily what this flag is intended to be thrown on, because that's what's happened with all of these other rulings. How many roughing the passer penalties are actually roughing the passer? I mean, be honest with yourself. Even if it's benefited the Bills. We've seen time. Josh Allen is the king of it. He is phenomenal at drawing roughing the passers. He's incredible at it. So I'm not sitting here trying to bitch about it because, in a way that seems like it hasn't benefited me. Like I'm coming at it from an unbiased perspective. It has benefited the Bills in the past. It's also hurt them as well. It's hurt every team. We know that the liberties taken with these penalties get far too drawn out. And the problem is so many of these penalties are so broad. They're on such a broad spectrum, there's no adequate definition. Therefore, every game it's reffed different. Every game, one call that would have been called in another game isn't called. Another game it is called. It's all over the place. And now you have one more thing to add to that. Just when it felt like your plate was already filled to the brim, here's one more scoop to worry about. And the struggle with talking about this is that nobody wants any of these season-ending injuries. Like, the league is worse when Nick Chubb's not playing and Mark Andrews isn't playing and Joe Burrow isn't playing and Justin Herbert. Like, you want the best of the best out there. But whether it's a hip drop tackle or whether it's, who the hell was it in the Super Bowl? The 49ers player who walked out on the field during a timeout. He walked off the sideline and tore his ACL. Let me look it up. Forget. Who was it? Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw was on the sideline during the Super Bowl and walked back out onto the field when it was time to go back on the field. Non-contact, walking off the sideline, tore his shit. It is an unfortunate reality of the game. And it's an unfortunate reality of every game. That includes non-contacts as well. How many injuries every year do you see in the NBA and in the MLB? It is the risk you take playing any sport. It's the risk you take if I were to go down to the YMCA right now and play 4-on-4 at the local gym. I could tear my shit up right now. I could be in a boot tomorrow morning if I go and play pickup hoops. It's the risk you take. Really, it's the risk you take leaving the house. I could step outside of the house right now and get bulldozed over by a bus. These guys know the risks. And unfortunately, no matter whether or not, what I just said about Dre Greenlaw is the perfect example. You could have these guys wearing bubbles, essentially. You could be Bubble Boy from Seinfeld, and you could still misplace your foot inside the bubble and tear your ACL. You're never going to get rid of injuries. And it just feels like every time there is a spike in injury, some ruling has to be made. So now you have a penalty that occurs if you hit too high, and you have a penalty that occurs if you hit too low. Here's my hope. What we saw in this video here, I think it's pretty blatant what is happening in this video. If you watch what's happening in the video, you watch a player tackle above the waist and then roll his legs around and use his whole lower body to come down on the defender. I hope that it's policed and reffed based on that and that alone. Because this, to me, it does feel like it'd be good to get out of the game simply due to the fact that you are having a player put the entirety of his weight on the lower body of someone as they're continuing to move. Right? What I don't want to see is this get taken to the nth degree like all of the other personal fouls have. That's basically my main point here. I feel like the roughing the passer call was meant to be put in place for a quarterback getting hit way too hard after the play. But now we see it when a guy gets blown on after he gets rid of the ball. Oh my God, pardon me. I got like something stuck in my throat. We now see far too often non-roughing calls get called as roughing. And we see far too often pass interference calls get thrown ad nauseum. I just hope this isn't one more thing where you see the flag get thrown and you're like, I can't believe you're throwing it on this. This is not necessarily what this was meant to be. The problem is when I'm trying to define what this is, it's really hard to explain what it is. Visually, you can tell. But to me, if it's so broad that it's tough to be explained properly, how broad are the calls on the field going to be within it? I also just feel like it's a bridge too far. It's a step too far in the pursuit of making a violent game 100% injury proof. It can never be. It will never be. But these rules seem like they're put in place in the pursuit of that. And I just don't know what these defenders are supposed to do now. Not every play is going to be designed to where you are going to have a textbook tackle opportunity in front of you. Especially if you're going up against a bigger player, or especially if you have a bad angle coming in on one side or the other. And then like Dave's saying here, with the game on the line, this is what I was talking about earlier. I mean, how many times are you going to see this happen with the game on the line, where you have a defender trying to make a tackle at all costs, which, by the way, that is his job. People are acting like, oh, he's trying to make the tackle at all costs. Like, you can't do that. That's the guy's job. You can make a tackle without throwing your helmet into somebody else's helmet. It's a lot harder, in my opinion, for these smaller guys to make a tackle on a bigger guy without putting their body into the lower body of that player. So if the game's on the line and say Travis Kelce catches the ball on the 5-yard line and the only angle that Rasul Douglas has on him is from the side, and he can get him down before the goal line if he puts his body weight into his lower body, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you don't do that, he's going to score and break that tackle with ease. If you do that, 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down at the 1-yard line. So once again, it just feels like a lot of things within the NFL, especially on defense, are damned if you do, damned if you don't type situations. And like Reese is saying, it's like the strategy is just to have big dudes now. Yeah, like I saw some stuff being discussed on Twitter where it's like the production of tight ends should probably go through the roof. The amount of tight ends in this league that are just as athletic as a lot of wide receivers, but are twice the size. You know how hard it is for smaller corners and tackles to get them down in an open field without being able to utilize the lower body? I'm all for making the game safer, and I'm all for getting rid of plays that don't make the game better and make it worse. Like I saw an example up here. Where the Bills fan's saying this very appropriately. He's saying the same motion as a horse collar. The horse collar, to me, something that makes the game worse. Nothing but bad things can come from a horse collar. If you're beat bad enough to where the only tackling opportunity you have is to grab a guy by the neck and pull him down backwards, that's on you. And that's going to do nothing but cause an injury. There's nothing positive that can come from that. Bills fan is saying it's the tackling motion that causes knee injuries. Agreed. I'm all for not swinging your body in and essentially using your lower body as a battering ram into the lower body of the player, right into his knee and blowing out his knee. That's what they're trying to get rid of. And like you said, exactly right. If it's appropriately called, it's a good thing. Does the NFL not ever go overboard, though? Is anything ever appropriately called? How often in the grand scheme of things, if you were to go and review every personal foul penalty throughout the duration of a football season, what do you think the percentage of the calls would be considered appropriately called? I couldn't tell you. But the fact that it's that uncertain is a problem. And now you're adding one more thing to it. I'm seeing people in here saying it makes the game soft or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it makes the game soft. It makes the game more difficult. I know that. And I think it makes the game. It's just these rules, unfortunately, go against the identity of the game itself. The game is a violent, Braveheart, like we were talking earlier, type sport where it's the incentive is just you're going after guys. And I'm all for getting rid of head-to-head because you don't have to have that. You can get rid of that. You cannot lower your head easily. You cannot spear a guy easily. You cannot grab a horse collar easily. But this just seems like one of those things where it's going to happen time and time again where a shorter player is so desperate to make a tackle, he's going to make a play in a crucial situation where it was the only play that a person of his caliber could make that was legal a year ago that all of a sudden isn't. And like Richie's saying, this is something I've noticed too. The tackling seemingly has gotten a bit worse over time. You don't, when I was taught growing up, it was always get low, low man wins, and wrap up. You don't really see a whole lot of wrapping up anymore. You see a lot of lower in the shoulder, a lot of shoulder tackles, a lot of running in and just knocking a guy over. So maybe what comes of this is better fundamentals and stuff. I don't know. What I think comes of this is a lot of extra penalties, a lot of advantage added additionally to the offense, who already has an entire arsenal of advantage on their side. It's just going to be interesting to see. Like we read earlier up here. Who was it that said it? It was very, very well said. Bills fan 783. If it's policed properly, if it is called appropriately, it's a good thing. I couldn't agree more. Will it be? Based on what we have seen, my hopes aren't high. Jeff Kinger, the king, coming in with a fat super chat. Jay King saying, shouldn't the players have a say in this? Not the Players Association, but those who actually still play the game. I'm guessing they would say different. They are a different breed of man. It takes balls to play this game and a little bit of crazy. So, Jeff, are you saying like former players or current players or both? Look, at the end of the day, I feel like the NFL is always going to do what they feel like it's best for the product and for the image of the product. And the more injuries they are, the less benefit the NFL gets. And that's why they continuously keep doing this. It's not beneficial to the NFL to have their players getting injured more often. It's beneficial for them to get rid of things that cause those injuries. And you understand that you want the NFL to be looking out for their players, and you want them to be as safe as they can. But what confuses me is you'll be immediately like on a dime you'll change a rule like this, like without a shadow of a doubt you will immediately ban a tackle. But you got every player in the league begging to play on grass instead of artificial turf because they claim that it causes more injuries. They claim it's way worse for their bodies and it's way worse for their style of play. Yet it falls on deaf ears every time. The NFL's like this to it every time. The NFL's like, oh, nothing to see here. That's what I don't understand. If it's all about safety and what Jeff is saying here, Jeff is saying, why not let the players weigh in on it? Well, here's a perfect example of that. Every player pounds the table to play on grass, some way louder than others, guys like George Kittle, who have a foundation surrounded around it. All they want to do is play on grass. They feel like it's a much safer environment for their bodies, for the overall game itself, less injuries. It's all you hear from these guys. Yet, you don't hear about any of it. The NFL continuously tells you that they haven't found any major difference in injury rate from turf to grass, even though the players say otherwise, and they're the ones out there risking their body, and they're the ones that are feeling the difference between turf and grass. Deaf ears. No change implemented and not one around the horizon anytime soon. Yet the injury rate increases with this type of hit last year. Notable players like Mark Andrews and Nick Chubb get hurt because of a play like this last year, and boom, within one off season, it's eradicated from the league, and if you do it, it's a game-altering penalty. That's what's intriguing to me. It just feels like there's some things that have a blind eye turned to them and others that are immediately reacted upon. I don't know. I don't know how much further you can go with this. What's the next thing going to be? Because here's the odd thing. I didn't know what a hip drop tackle was probably until about a year ago. So what's going to be the new tackle 5 years from now that is now going to be used to circumvent the hip drop tackle? That's technically legal, but eventually they'll get rid of that too. Like, how many more things when does the buck stop? I don't know. Those are the couple of things I find interesting. Like, where is the line going to be drawn? And if it's really about safety, then why isn't the grass field thing taken more seriously when I hear about it all the time during the season from players and local reporters who report on those players' complaints? Don't you remember even in our circumstance when the Bills went over to Jacksonville and played on the turf that they equated to essentially concrete? We lost Matt Milano, just so happens to be our best player, on the team, probably not named Josh Allen. Lose him for the year on that shit-ass turf that every single one of them complained about. But that doesn't matter. That's what makes no sense to me. Now, if the NFL was like, you know what, we hear you guys, we're going to go all grass by 2027, we got to give the owners time to get these fields in place. But by 2027, we're switching to all grass. If I heard that, then I'd be like, all right, you know what? I mean, these guys are just doing what they feel like they got to do. Unfortunately, I feel like the game's going to suffer a bit because of it, but they're safety first, apparently, and they're sticking to it. With stuff like this, it makes you wonder what the priorities are. And like Roy's saying, there's no money coming out of the pocket of the owner for banning a hip drop tackle. There's millions of dollars coming out of the pocket of the owner for putting in a grass field into their stadium. So I don't know. I wonder a couple of things I wonder. Where does the buck stop, if ever? And how impactful is this new rule going to be on games in the near future? You know damn well there's going to be a Monday that's going to roll around where hip drop tackle with 3 seconds left in game puts Chiefs on the 3-yard line to win it or whatever. Like I said, and I'm sure you guys feel where I'm coming from. It's very hard to sit here and say, hey, you can't get rid of that. Love you, Caroline. Have a great night. See ya. It's very hard to sit here and be like, oh, more violence. That's not what I'm saying. Like, so many of these things I'm in favor of. I'm all in favor of the helmet-to-helmet being gone. You can't have it. Nothing good comes from it. The horse collar, get rid of it. Even this kickoff. You didn't hear me once say, oh, this is bullshit or whatever. I'm fine with it. Let's see what happens. Let's see what the outcome of it is. Ones like this, stuff like this, I don't know how to feel. Because no, I don't want more injuries. No, I don't want these guys getting their legs blown out. No, I don't want that. But at the same time, like, I don't want Dre Greenlaw tearing his ACL walking off the sideline. I don't want. I mean, what was Joe Burrow's injury there with his hand or whatever? Like, what are you going to do about that? How are we going to get rid of it? You can't get rid of that. But maybe Charles is right. It's overblown. We reacted this way about the horse collar. No one cares anymore. And look, that's what I'm open to. And that's like what the previous comment earlier said from Bills fan 23, was it? Bills fan 7883. That's what I'm open for. If this is called properly, if these exact examples that we were shown here via Tom Pelissero's Twitter are the ones that are called, where you're seeing a blatant use of the defender's legs being driven in to the leg of the ball carrier with full force, essentially, like if you see, this is a great example, this one right here. Watch how brutal of the impact. Watch how brutal the impact is on the leg here. You see how the leg just dies? Like the leg just dies there. That's where the injuries are coming from. You see this right there, right there. I'm all about getting rid of that. And what you can see comes of that. Like, for instance, this tackle could have been made here. This tackle would have already been made. The tackle right, look at the tackle's made. The tackle's made. You don't have to go and do the additionals here. You don't have to swing your leg around there. I don't think you would have had to have done that. It was a great low tackle. Right, look at right there. Look at the tackle's made. He's got him. You don't need to. What the defender does here is look at, he takes his leg and buries it on the calf of Tony Pollard there. I'm all for getting rid of that. That's going to result in an injury very often. So like I said, and like we were talking about, if it's policed properly, it's probably a really good thing. What I hope doesn't come from it is what has been birthed from a lot of these other things, where there's ticky-tack BS roughing calls, ticky-tack BS pass interference calls. I just hope there's not one more thing to have a ticky-tack BS call, because the result of these calls aren't ticky-tack BS. They're massive game changers. They're 15 yards and a first down. Corey's saying the tackle only happened because of the force of momentum swinging around. I think on some of these, yes. But I think like on this one, I think the tackle's already made here before he puts his lower body on the leg. The tackle's made like right there. And you can see his lower body's still where it's at. But watch, he swings his body. You see the lower end of his like where his ass is? His ass is on like the ankle of the guy. That's what they're trying to get rid of. But like you're saying, like we're talking about, I mean, I hear you. It is so ticky-tack. Like it is so marginal between a penalty and not a penalty. That's why I feel like we're going to see a lot of non-penalties that are going to be called. So Reese is saying you should just be able to challenge ref calls if they're going to be bigger parts of the game. That's a very, very, very good point. The NFL does not want to have the teams given the ability to challenge the penalties, because we saw the result of that when they implemented the ability to challenge pass interference after that Rams-Saints game. Not a single pass interference was overturned. Not a single one. So the NFL just got rid of the ability to do it. But to that point, this is the next thing I wanted to talk about via Tom Pelissero once again. There are going to be some changes to these ticky-tack calls that I'm very excited about. This is one thing when it comes to the officiating that I'm awfully excited about, and I hope will also be able to be utilized with this hip drop situation. If they're able to have essentially a replay assistant, not a ref on the field that has to stop the game in real time, but if they're able to have a replay assistant up in the booth or somewhere in a remote location rewatching the play and able to determine whether or not it was a penalty in real time, that is going to be a major benefit to the game. So all of what we were just talking about with this hip drop tackle and my fear of it just adding more and more unnecessary penalties to the game, that can be alleviated if this winds up working the way it could potentially work. So say you have one of those hip drop tackles and it wasn't by rule the flag that was supposed to be called. The play that was implemented, or the play that was carried out, was not by rule a hip drop tackle. There can be a replay assistant either up in the booth or at a remote location that can phone down to the head ref and say, hey, you guys got it wrong. That's not a call. And in real time, that guy can watch every angle of it, make a determination, phone down to the ref, and the ref in real time can say, correction, no flag on the play, second down. So here is what was announced at the owners' meeting. And I think this is a huge step towards getting rid of a lot of the BS in the sport that comes from unnecessary penalty calls. Tom Pelissero tweets, this is big. NFL Competition Committee Chairman Rich McKay told me the replay assistant will now be permitted to correct certain types of incorrect calls for roughing the passer and intentional grounding. Must be purely objective. Either, for example, QB wasn't hit in the head, was out of pocket, etc. This is a good step forward. It's not everything, but it's a step forward. So say you get a roughing the passer call and it's total BS and you go back and watch and it's obviously not a call. Previously, there was nothing you could do about it. The call on the field was the call on the field. That was the end of it. Now, the replay assistant can rewatch that and say, hey, after we looked at it, there's no way that should have been called, phone down, and then the refs go and make the change. Same thing with grounding here. We saw a few groundings. I feel like Josh Allen was burned on one of them. Remember Josh Allen got called on that grounding? That was blatantly not a grounding call. Wasn't it against the Eagles? Yeah, it was against the Eagles late in that game. It should have been a freaking roughing the passer call, and he got called for grounding. Just last year, you weren't able to do anything about that if it was the incorrect call. Now the replay assistant has been given clearance to be able to correct the call, phone that down to the ref, and then have that implemented into the game. So that's a step forward. Now, you can only do that on, from what it looks like here, roughing the passer and intentional grounding as of right now. Tom would go on to say that the competition committee has long opposed challenges to penalty calls because it essentially substitutes one person's judgment for another's. This is much more narrow, but another step towards empowering the replay assistant to fix clear and obvious mistakes. And I think that is what's key here. If a play is so subjective that you can't tell whether it's a call or not, then going with the rule on the field is probably the best way to go, right? But if there's a call made that is such a shit call and there's nothing you can do about it, that's just unfair. That's the benefit of this. Because we see it far too often where there's just a call that should not have been called. Not that it was super close and you could argue whether or not it could have been called. I'm talking calls where you're like, dude, what did this guy see? This is what this new rule will be able to help with. These replay assistants will be able to just get rid of them. They'll be able to just get rid of these calls in real time. So I'm really excited about this and the future of this. I think it should be extended beyond just these two calls. They should be able to do this for everything. They should be able to do this right down to offsides. Like if they were able to in real time see that there was no way that was an offsides, if you can tell on the replay, why not utilize it the way you're utilizing it with all these other calls? And then pass interference to me is the big one too. Pass interference is such a game-altering penalty. Like it is such a massive penalty in this game. They have got to find a way to make sure it's 100% adequate. That would go a long way if they were able to implement this type of step with that as well. So that's one of the other things that was kind of a big to-do coming out of the league meetings. By the way, I forgot I had this clip. Back to the kickoffs real quick. The NFL legitimately adopted the new kickoff directly from the XFL. Like, there's no real difference. It is exactly the same. The XFL had this in place. NFL liked it. They're taking it on. So Adam Schefter actually tweeted out an example that you can see real here that I had favorited up so we could watch it. So if you haven't seen yet what exactly this is going to look like, this right here is exactly what the kickoff will look like. So you have the kicker up here. Now, I believe in the NFL, they're going to have the kicker at the 35. Yeah, the ball's at the 35. It looks like in the XFL, the ball's at the 30. But regardless, this is exactly what it looks like. So the kicker's by himself. He boots it. You have the kicking team lined up here. And then 5 yards apart, you have the returning team lined up here. You got your receiver back there. Nobody moves at all. So the ball has already been kicked, but nobody moves. Unlike the last iteration of the kick, the original kick, everybody moves as soon as the ball is booted. Now you don't move until, boom, it's returned. As soon as he returns the ball, as soon as he touches the ball, everybody gets moving. And as a result, like I was talking about earlier, it seems like it's going to be real hard to keep the team away from at least the 30-yard line. I mean, that's a pretty good return. And that was honestly a pretty damn good kick. That's probably exactly what you want. The kick, that's probably ideal. This is a great example. This is about as ideal of a kick as you could want because you put him about as far back into the, what are they calling it? The landing zone as you can get without kicking a touchback. And if you remember, a bounce into the end zone puts the ball at the 20, not the 35. So either way, you're all set. This is honestly a pretty damn good return. But it does feel like if you have a good returner, just based on the lack of momentum that because you're only going to get about a 5-yard start before you meet the kicker. You got to imagine that the majority of these kickoffs are going to be coming out to about the 30 at the very least. So there's that. One last thing I wanted to talk about before we close up shop tonight. And by the way, Rico's on tonight as well for his standard time for the Rico report. So full jam-packed day here on the Buffalo Fanatics, and he'll have all his thoughts as well about all of this stuff that came out of the owners meeting. One more thing I wanted to touch on. This is awfully interesting. One thing voted on this past week, and they don't just vote on things on the field. They vote about off the field stuff too. The new version of Hard Knocks will not just follow one team. Instead, it will follow all 4 teams from one specific division. So last year, for example, if it were the Dolphins, like it was in season, or the Jets in preseason, it would have featured the Bills. It would have been the AFC East. So if they had chosen the Jets, and they would have naturally, if that was the same situation this year, they naturally would have done it, right? With the addition of Aaron Rodgers, it just felt like it was always going to be the Jets. So had last year have had this rule, the Bills would have been as much of a feature within Hard Knocks as the Jets themselves were. So now it's not just centered around one team. It's centered around a division. I would imagine, based on the fact that the Jets were the preseason Hard Knocks last year and the Dolphins were the in-season Hard Knocks last year, I have a feeling it's going to be some time before we see the AFC East featured as the division in Hard Knocks. But at some point, it's going to inevitably end up happening. You only have 8 divisions to choose from. So at some point, you're going to inevitably end up having to be featured. And the Bills have never been on it, so it could be fun. But I got an insane kick out of watching the behind the scenes of both the Jets last year and the Dolphins, mainly because of their ties with the Bills. It was unbelievable being able to watch that unfold, especially watching the Dolphins one towards the end. That was great. But now we get to watch 4 individual teams within one division on Hard Knocks. I thought that was a pretty significant change because you're literally tripling the amount of content that you can get. And I feel like we get an incredible amount of content from these Hard Knocks. So I'm awfully excited about it. Reese is saying, Z-Bot, go over the other rule change as well. Which one are you referring to? Which other rule change? I'm looking right now. They kind of make it hard to like find it, I feel like. It's not like easy to get a cut and dry like a going to the football operations Twitter. The kickoff one's the one that's been everywhere. I mean, you can find everything about that anywhere you want. Okay, here we got some more right here. Reese is saying something would change a possession. Let's take a look and see what this is. So here are a couple more. I don't even know if I realized it. These are a little more nuanced. But these are additional rules that have been implemented starting this coming league year. The first one, by competition committee, amends Rule 15, Section 3, Article 3 to include a ruling of a passer down by contact or out of bounds before throwing a pass as a reviewable play. Okay, so you can now review a passer being down by contact or out of bounds before throwing a pass. I thought you could already review that. I could be wrong, I guess. But I thought you could review whether or not a quarterback was down before getting rid of the ball. Am I nuts? Was that not already reviewable? But if it wasn't, apparently it is now. Allow a replay review when there is a clear and obvious visual evidence that the game clock expired before any snap. Oh, that's interesting. So I wonder now if you have the added benefit of getting that like almost additional second the refs seem to give you on the play clock. Yeah. Says now you can review when it's a clear and obvious, when there's clear and obvious evidence that the game clock has expired. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know how much of an impact that'll have, but maybe it will. Here's another one. For 1 year only, amend Rule 6 to create a new form of free kick play that is designed to resemble a typical scrimmage play by aligning players on both teams closer together and restricting movement to reduce space and speed and promote more returns. Permits the replay official automatically review whether a free kick legally touched the ground. You never see the free kick. I don't know. None of these seem like new or very interesting to me, to be honest with you. Reese, you're going to have to define more about what you were talking about before we close up shop here, because I'm not seeing this rule change that you're talking about change of possession. To allow for an enforcement of a major foul by the offense prior to a change of possession in a situation where there are fouls by both teams. Oh, is that a thing? That's huge if so. So does that mean if one team gets called for like a holding and the other team gets called for a roughing the passer, the roughing the passer trumps the holding? To allow for an enforcement of a major foul by the offense prior to a change of possession in a situation where there are fouls by both teams. So it sounds like if the offense commits a foul and then turns the ball over, and there's another foul by the defense, dude, I honestly have no idea. I think that's pretty much it, though. I haven't seen anything else major. The major ones were the kickoff and the hip drop tackle. But I also thought the ability to being able to review the Oh, so Reese, that was what you were talking about? Okay, yeah, I don't know exactly what that means. Something about 2 penalties and whatever. All I know is everything I've read about rule changes the last couple of days, nothing's really made an emphasis on that, so I wonder how big it really must be. But if I find out anything else, I'll make sure to talk about it on the next episode for sure. But the big ones, obviously, of course, the kickoff and the hip drop tackle. We'll have to see how big of a change it ends up being. But we know for a fact that kickoff is a massive change nonetheless. I'm excited to see how it comes to fruition within the game, but it's going to take some getting used to. I appreciate you guys joining me today on this Tuesday afternoon for a smoke break. Recapped all of the new changes that came out of the recent owner and coaches meetings, and they were big ones. They were big ones. The NFL is going to look a lot different than it has in the past, but who knows? Maybe it makes it a lot more fun and exciting. Only time will tell. I urge you to not make a full-blown opinion on it until we see it in the game and see what ends up coming from it. We got a ways away until we get there, but it'll be fun. And speaking of fun, we're less than a month away from the draft as well, folks. We're less than a month away. A month from yesterday, NFL draft. So things are coming around the corner. We get the changes. We get the free agency. The draft's coming up. We're moving along. I'm going to be moving along on out of here, and I'll see you on the next one. Make sure to catch Rico later tonight for the Rico Report. And on your way out as well, like button, subscribe button, and check out my friends over at BetUS. 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,500 using the promo code JOIN125. And if you just created a new account, DM me a screenshot of your username. First 4 people to do that get a $25 free play directly from me. All right, guys, much love. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. See you on the next one. And as always,